Hi, I'm Garner Scott. My wife loves pickled beets, and normally when I make pickled beets I use vinegar, but today I'm doing it a little differently. So join me as I ferment beets. I grow beets in my garden and recently harvested these beauties. Now, normally I like to eat the smaller beets, but when I have some that are a little bit bigger, I think they beg for pickling. And as I mentioned, I normally pickle using vinegar, but today I'm going to be pickling using a fermentation process. Fermenting beets is incredibly easy. You just take beets, put them in a jar or a crock, and then cover with a brine. And the brine is just salt and water. Today, I'll be adding one ingredient. This is star anise, and it should add a very unique flavor to the beets. I began by cleaning the beets very well. They were covered with soil after I harvested them, but a quick scrub under water and they're ready to go. You won't need to remove the skin of the beets for this recipe. You can, but it's not necessary. I'll take the clean beets, cut off the root section, cut off the stems, and this will go into my compost pile. Just set it off to the side, grab the next one, cut off the root, cut off the stems, set this aside for the compost pile. And I'll continue doing this with about 4 to 5 of these larger beets for each quart that I plan to make. I'm going to cut these beets into 1/2-inch chunks. I'll cut off one of the sides and then just make successive cuts to approximate about 1/2 inch. And then I'll come back and I'll cut the beets into little squares and then put them in a bowl. Now, remember, you don't need to remove the skin from the beets, but beets is not the prettiest vegetable. And so if you want it to look a little nicer and to have the chunks a little more symmetrical, feel free to trim as necessary. If you like the symmetrical look, just do away with a little bit of the curve, straighten off your cuts, make a square or a rectangle, and now you have beautiful symmetrical cubes. I'm okay with some of the chunks being irregular, and leaving the skin on adds extra vitamins. So I'm okay if my beets aren't going to be the prettiest ones, but they'll taste good. I finished cutting my beets into 1/2-inch cubes, and I think I made extra, but that's okay because whatever's left over, I'm planning on roasting for dinner tonight. With the beets cut, now you can focus on the brine. The recipe for the brine is very easy. You start with 2 cups of filtered water. Now, I'm actually filling to 4 cups because I'm doubling this recipe. And for every 2 cups of water, you want to add 1 tablespoon of salt. So I'm adding 2 tablespoons to the 4 cups of water. So the recipe again: cubed beets, brine, and the star anise. And for each quart of these fermented beets, I'll be using 2 whole stars. I'll begin by dropping 1 of the stars into an empty, clean quart jar. Then I'll just fill it up with my beets. Shake a little bit so that they compact a little bit more. And I want them to come up just about to the bottom of the ring on the jar. And now I'll just fill with the brine up to about that same point. And as the last step in filling the jar, I'll add the second piece of star anise. Next, you need to weigh down the beets. I've discovered these really cool glass weights, so I'll just set it into the jar, and that helps ensure that all of the beet chunks are submerged in the brine. With the beets weighted down, now it's time to cover. I like to use these fermentation lids. They're not necessary, but it's something that I find makes the whole process much easier. The fermentation process causes the creation and release of carbon dioxide gas. Now, by using one of these fermentation lids, the gas can escape through the top of this, and you really don't need to worry much at all about it. If you don't use one of these lids, that's perfectly fine. You just need to put some type of cover over the top to allow that gas to escape. Feel free to use cheesecloth, muslin, even a kitchen towel. The idea is to keep dirt and insects out while the gas is escaping and the fermentation takes place. And that glass weight I use to weight the beets down, that's not absolutely necessary either. But you want something to hold the beets underneath the surface of the brine. You could use a plastic bag weighted to keep it underneath. You can use cabbage leaves, you could use celery, you can use anything you want as long as the beets stay submerged underneath the liquid. So why do the beets need to remain submerged? Well, fermentation is an anaerobic process. That means the bacteria that conduct fermentation can't live in the presence of oxygen. So any beets that float to the top will be exposed to the air, and fermentation will stop for those pieces. So we want everything to be weighted and ferment evenly. This is a 2-week fermentation. So now they need to go into a cool, dark location. For me, that's my basement. And about every 2-3 days, I'll check on them just to make sure there's no mold and to make sure that everything looks okay, to include the escaping gas bubbles so that I know the fermentation is taking place. So I'll be back in 2 weeks and I'll let you know how it goes. The beets have had a full 2 weeks of fermentation, and for good measure, I went ahead and put the jars in the refrigerator for a couple days just to help the flavors meld. And how are they? Well, the jar with the star anise. Produces a crunchy, slightly salty beet. It's like eating a crunchy pickle, but it has that earthiness of the beet and that distinctive flavor of the star anise. And I actually like it quite a bit. The other jar, where I didn't use the star anise, just the beet, is also very good. But the focus in this jar is more on that briny flavor. Still has the saltiness, still has the sourness that you're probably familiar with in the pickling process. Also, this jar was primarily filled with those cubes where I had cut off the skin. So it has a much deeper red color. This jar with the beets, where I left the skins on most of the beets, has more of a brownish color. And that's probably because the skin on the beets was brown in color. So I had pointed out that it might be personal preference as far as whether you leave the skins on or not, but it also goes to show that it changes the color whether you leave the skins on or not. What's the verdict? I think they're both good. However, my family, after having tasted both, still prefer the flavor of the basic beet in brine. I think the star anise covers up some of that briny sour flavor, but it's definitely something to try. We'll end up eating both of these. They're wonderful to add to salads. It's a great snack, and when we put together plates of pickles, this will definitely be on it. So there you have it. How to ferment beets. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know below. If you haven't subscribed to the Gardener Scott channel, you can do so now. And if you like the video, you can give me a thumbs up and share it. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy fermenting.